This video is sponsored by Squarespace. I've committed to doing 1 hour long solo photo walks each month, exploring the town that I grew up in. In this video, I'm going to take you all along for one of these photo walks, exploring the streets of Mare Island, a historic naval shipyard in Vallejo, California. All of the photos shown are going to be straight out of camera JPEGs, with some slight tweaks here and there in Lightroom. A word of warning though, this video is going to be a little longer than usual. I wanted to give you all a realistic feel for how I actually explore, find shots, and work a specific scene to get the photo. I'll be sharing my thought process via a voiceover as best I can, as a lot of you have actually been asking about how I compose my photos. But before we start, I wanted to give a quick mention to today's video sponsor, Squarespace. I've been using Squarespace for over 10 years now. Their templates are really easy to use and they make it incredibly simple to create and maintain a professional looking website. My Squarespace website was an essential part of how I built my wedding photography business. It allowed me to showcase my portfolio, share recent weddings and engagement shoots on my blog, and receive inquiries from potential clients through my contact form. And now that I'm closing the door to wedding photography, I'm now using my website to sell presets, publish gear reviews, and I'm actually in the process of updating it to reflect this new type of photography work that I've been creating. In today's digital age, it's vital to have a website that you can completely control, something that's free from the constraints of social media algorithms. So if you're one of those photographers relying on your Instagram profile as the sole place to share your work and build your photography business, I would really consider making a website on Squarespace. You can visit squarespace.com/ReggieBallesteros to start a free trial and get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's get started. On this photo walk, I wanted to stick with just one camera and one lens, so I was using the Fujifilm X-T5 with the XF33mm f1.4 with the Moment CineBloom 10% diffusion filter mounted on it. So the first thing that I do is set a timer for 1 hour, as I find that this is the perfect balance between giving me time to explore and also having a little sense of urgency or pressure. What I'm mainly looking for is shapes and geometry, so lines, rectangles, triangles, circles, or interesting light, shadows, pops of color, or reflections. And I think the most awkward part is warming up your eye, so I'm trying to default to frames of something that I'm comfortable with. I start off with a photo of the wall of this building. I'm really trying to create some order out of the rectangles made by the doors and the red bricks and the asphalt at the bottom of the frame, but I did want a little bit of room between this top bar and the top of the frame. So I reframed the photo to reveal some bricks and windows between the bar and the top of the photo. Also, you're going to see that my ISO is set at 160 for most of this photo walk, and the reason for this is mainly out of habit coming from the X-T3, the XS10, and the X100V. I noticed the yellow from these posts surrounding the fire hydrant. I tried to make some sort of arrangement with the vertical spacing of the post, the fire hydrant, and the cone, but I'm not really a big fan of this shot. Across the street, I see this large puddle underneath the fence, and I try to use the puddle to catch the tops of the buildings in the background. I especially like the pops of yellow that contrast the blue sky. I have my aperture actually set at 2.8, which is typically what I set my lens to for photos like this that aren't a portrait or anything like that, and I don't need shallow depth of field. I like how the light is falling on the roof of the building in the distance, so I cross the street and try to shoot through the fence. I stop down my lens to about f4 so that the chain link fence is still visible. And my idea behind this shot is to have a mirror image using the puddle so that there's the triangle at the top and then the bottom because of the light on the building. And I also use this fence post at the left to give some type of depth and function as a framing device. Without it, I feel like it gives the eye too much room to wander with the added negative space. Using the other building in the distance, I wanted to make the chain link fence the point of focus for this next shot. The out of focus elements are still mirrored here, and the bright buildings allow the chain links which are in shadow to still stand out, although I'm not really a big fan of my shadow at the bottom right. Next, I keep the composition the same but focus on the building past the fence, and I'm definitely getting like zombie apocalypse vibes, mostly because I've been watching The Last of Us on HBO. And I've actually been photographing a lot of reflections these days. While this shot isn't great, I can't really leave any stone unturned. And I feel like my diligence does pay off throughout this photo walk as I come across some really good reflection shots toward the end of this video. To my right, I noticed that the corner of the building being perfectly split into light and shadow. I cut the frame right down the middle. The composition could be more interesting, maybe if the left and right side were perfectly mirrored with the windows and the doors, but I really like the contrast here. Continuing on from this spot, I head along where I can photograph the corner of this building to the left again. It did end up being a pretty boring shot, so I just filled the frame and tried to frame the number 98 within the diamond created within the chain link fence. It's completely okay to take bad photos. I mean, with every bad photo is practice to get that next good photo. I noticed the shadows being cast by the awning, so I crossed the street to shoot the side of the building straight on. I open up the tilt screen for a low angle shot, and after using the XS10 and XH2S for a whole year, I'm really glad to have the tilt screen back for photography on the X-T5. For this shot, I wanted to play off the layers of colors here. So starting off at the top with the blue, then the red of the roof, and then the white and orange of the wall and the doors to the left with the dark shadow on the right hand side. And then we have the gray of the asphalt in the light, and then the green of the grass, and then more asphalt. And then at the all the way bottom is going to be the asphalt that's in shadow. And as I'm moving down the road looking for that next shot, I'm looking at the side of the building for a different arrangement playing off of the doors and the walls and the shadows. I tried using one door to each side of the center line of this frame, but it wasn't exactly a symmetrical composition. Plus the posts of the fence kind of break up the order of the shot. So it's not bad, but I think it could be better if the fence wasn't there at all. As I continue down the road, I notice that the sun is hitting like a stack of beams in the distance, peeking above the fence. I filled the frame with the stacked beams contrasting like the red rust and then the yellow with the blue sky. And because of the side of the beams were directly lit by the sun, it allows me to drop the exposure all the way down, which keeps the blue nice and saturated in the sky. Before I keep going down the road, I do head down this lot across the street to photograph this line of windows that are down the side of the building. I was trying to capture the leading lines and the repetition of the windows, but I think it would have been a stronger photo if there was something on the right hand side of the door. When photographing still life and kind of like this mundane architecture, I tend to follow where the light is and avoid overly shaded areas like this one. But the doors and the signs are giving me, you know, like those zombie apocalypse vibes, so I kind of had to see what I can get here. I really like this huge door, but I needed to scoot back a little bit to shoot it with the 33. This one is a very simple shot. Here I'm playing off the texture, so the rust, the brick, the frosted window, it all just gives those like keep out vibes, hinting that there's something dangerous inside. And then I did have to scoot back even further to frame a shot with the door and some of the windows. Definitely sticking to the rule of 3 here. So 3s or odd numbers just do a better job for groupings. This shot just has a ton of character and texture. I'm just wondering how it would look if like the sun was actually shining on like parts of the windows or the side of the building for a more dynamic shot. Continuing down the lot, I see these like 3 metal posts. They just kind of stand out to break the monotony of the windows and the bricks. So I get a little bit closer to photograph them. I'll admit it's not the most interesting photo, but after 10 years of wedding photography, I've kind of learned how to just like document and compose details even if the actual subject doesn't interest me, because sometimes a watch or jewelry doesn't interest me, but I have to photograph it for the client. So in this case, I try to ensure that the gap between the left post and the left edge of the frame and the right post and the right edge of the frame are similar. Also that this gap toward the top and the gap to the bottom are similar. It's not really a great photo by any means, but I think taking these photos helps to keep my composition mind sharp when there's nothing interesting, so that when something interesting does present itself, I'm kind of ready and primed to take that photo. This one is another door. It has a cool wooden board that says like secured on it. With these types of shots, I just like to keep it very clean, centered, and evenly spaced and leveled. You don't have to make it more interesting than it has to be when the texture and just the look of the environment it already says it all. And then I'm going to rotate for a vertical composition of the same shot. Looking through this fence on the right hand side, everything is a little too far away to photograph with the 33mm 1.4. So turning around, I'm actually drawn to these pops of color of this utility box, this valve handle, the railing, and I try to create some order with all the chaos. I'm including what looks like a pipe, the window, and the chemical warning sign. And now that I'm reviewing this photo, I realize that I kind of photographed things similar to how I had to create engineering drawings. First, we had to start off with like a 3D corner view, which is called an isometric, just like this one. And then after that photo, I took it straight on, which is called an elevation view from the side. So for those of you who are familiar with construction or engineering, you'll know what I'm talking about. As I continue walking, I'm wondering if I'm venturing a little too far, but I can't help but see that there's actually some structures in the sunlight. Looks like some kind of turnstile or gate for when the ships here used to port, and I'm really just looking for something that catches my eye. I settle on this turnstile, so this photo is just really a study of light, shadow, and texture again. I like how the light and the shadow are splitting this pole right down the middle, changing my perspective a little higher. I like how the texture and the color of this roof is blue. The corrugated texture gives a pattern of light and shadow with the small lip at the top giving a hard shadow. And the blue looks very retro with the classic chrome film simulation recipe that I'm using. Then looking through the turnstiles, I see some light coming through in combination with the Moment CineBloom filter. It really gives a nice halation effect. And you can really see it in between the different horizontal bars of the turnstiles. The halation will kind of like go into and bleed over into the shadows. And then I'm getting in a little bit closer to set the focus just for the wires itself. Maybe this was like for some like keypad or intercom. And then now I'm adjusting my perspective to get the light coming through along with this little console. So I have the console again, but with this really nice glow that wraps around the edges of it. And again, this is the effect of the CineBloom filter in full effect. It gives kind of like a film look to the image. Some people love it, some people hate it. I personally love it, as the combo of the X-T5 and the 33 can be a little bit too sharp sometimes. So as I head back out to the road, I'm just photographing little details here and there that catch my eye. So these posts kind of like juxtaposed with the door on the left hand side. These little like leaves growing inside this pit. Moss growing on the side of the wall near the bricks. Blades of grass growing on the ground. Honestly, I think most of these photos feel like they're lacking interest, mainly because of the lack of direct light or backlight. And then I see these bottle caps collected at the edge of this windowsill. For this one, I open up the lens to 1.4 so that I can get that shallow depth of field. And as I continue walking, I do notice some empty bottles on the ground. I'm not sure if it's from the bottle caps or not, but I do like how the light catches the droplets at the top of this green bottle. And also that red kind of like bokeh ball in the background is a nice little detail to break things up. Heading back toward the road now, I'm trying to get my mindset back into shooting with more dynamic light, and I start off by shooting these arrangement of beams, trying to get that layered effect again. Going from the top to bottom, it's gonna be the blue sky with like these rusted things at the top, the beams, and there's like a large beam that goes across. There's tarp, the asphalt, and then the darker asphalt that's underneath the puddle. I spot this lone cone here next to the puddle, and I'm trying to get a little bit lower to photograph its reflection. This came out really blue and orange, and I'm loving the color contrast. I just wish that the background behind the cone didn't have all this stuff near it, because it's pretty distracting. So usually when something like this happens, I try to move around the quote-unquote subject to get a better perspective, maybe one with a less distracting background. This one is a little bit better, as the cone has a dark background that isn't competing behind it with the bright orange cone. Now I start my trek to round the corner to the other side of the block. As I'm walking on the other side, I spot an arrangement of containers across the street and turn to shoot it straight on. I'm really loving the different colors and texture along with the layers on this photo. So if you go left to right, we have the blue containers, the white container, and then the red orange container, all with this like corrugated texture that goes from, you know, light shadow. So a lot of texture going across, and then going from top to bottom, we have the blue with the rusted roofing right below it, and then there's like this dark portion beneath the roof, and then the containers, the concrete, and then the sidewalk, and then the street with the white line, and then the yellow line. So a lot of layers going left to right and top to bottom. And this is, you know, literally a photo of nothing, but it's also got so much going on at the same time. And these are the types of photos that I've been really drawn to. Here I spot this building across the street, and I really like the shape of it. It has a raised center with the lower portions on the sides. And I like that it has a door on the left hand side and a large roll-up garage in the center. And using this kind of like shadow that's angled from the door, I wanted to create a subtle leading line that goes to the fire hydrant with the yellow bollards, and that yellow also plays off with the yellow on the street. I cross the street to get a tighter framing of the building. This one is very simple. It's just an elevation view of the building taken straight on. And I like how the building itself is centered, but the garage is actually a little bit off-centered. It's like an odd tension, especially combined with the shadow on the right. And I actually purposely left the tire marks at the bottom of the frame. I was almost going to crop it out, but it does add some different foreground interest and kind of like a little gem for someone who's looking around the frame a little bit closer. And then I noticed another puddle that I could use the reflection off of. And here I try to play off the leading lines that are combined with the reflection, make converging lines toward the center. And then here I'm going to rotate for a horizontal frame. I'm leaving a bit of the other building at the right hand side of the frame, but for this one I do feel like it's a little bit crowded at the top of the frame. So I reframe it slightly for some more headroom at the top and to include more of the door at the right hand side as kind of like a counterpoint to the building on the left hand side. I want to frame just this specific portion with the red kind of like door frame. So I like the reddish orange wood over a window, it looks like, and then we have the red door frame and then the little L pattern that's made with the conduit and just the shadow that cuts right across. It's kind of a way to just make this organized chaos of textures and light. And then looking at this garage door, I feel drawn toward this specific gear that's exposed on the chain pulley system. I like the little spurs and you can see all the gear teeth. When you're taking photos, don't forget to look up. So for this particular photo, I back up and photograph just the corner of this building. There's this little like pipe that comes out with a red little tip on the top and bringing down the exposure. The sky turns into this very navy blue looking color. So it's different than the typical blue sky that you see. And this photo is one of my favorite compositions of the bunch. Basically, I tried to capture this kind of like zigzag silhouette of the building. So going from left to right, it's angling up, angling back down, and then it angles back up again with the other portion of the roof, and then angling back down. And has a little bit of character because, again, of that pipe that's coming up. And I just like how nice and bold and dark the blue is. And then we have the shadow play. Overall, I just really like this photo. Before I head out to the road, I like the light that's getting cast on this Railroad Avenue building. It just looks very nice against the yellow with the rusted, but I wanted to include part of this building on the right hand side as just kind of like a framing device to help the eye focus straight toward that building across the street. And then I turned for a horizontal composition and actually dropped the exposure down even more. And it really highlights this little like awning that's underneath the direct sunlight. And then also I like the fact that you can see fire hydrant with those bollards as a way to complement the composition on the other side. As I'm walking down, I see this building on the right hand side has a lot of a weathered wooden texture. And I wanted to see how this played off first in color, and I like how the sun gives a little bit of a warm vibe to the wooden panels, but I think where I wanted to try a black and white conversion with Acros on the film simulation, how that would come out, and this one textures really pop out. So if you have a composition that has a lot of texture, give a try with black and white, especially if you have something that's coming with the lighting from the side. Then I see this other building that I like with the sun kissing it from the side. So I wanted to see if I can catch some type of like sun flare effect here. And you can see that the sun is flaring out a little bit on the left hand side and this little box casts this huge shadow through. But I wanted to also see how this building looks particularly straight on in this kind of like elevation view. As I'm approaching it closer, I'm really honing in on specifically this window with this door next to it. And I tried to come up with a little composition that just has the door, the window, and a little bit of the blue from the sky peeking out on the left hand side. And there's a lot of different texture on the ground from these leaves where I don't know where the leaves came from because there's no trees nearby. And because I noticed that there's leaves, I get pretty low and I photographed the leaves. I actually stopped it down to 5.6 and the depth of field is still shallow, so you can see the texture of the panels of the building along with the leaf in the foreground. As I'm continuing down the road, I noticed that there's this row of windows on this building that is lit by the sun. So I use this fence post at the left to create a little bit of a foreground framing element. And I have the windows just going all the way down across. And I like the leading lines of the top of the building going down toward the center of the frame. And the reason why I came to this particular side of the block in this section of Mare Island was because of this particular building. It's a building that was like painted with all these crazy abstract geometric shapes. So I used this fence on the right hand side to create a framing element, and I photographed this side of the building. But I really want to see what it looks like from the front side of it. As I make my way around, I shoot just the corner of this building first so I can get some of the roof as well. And I'm having to scoot back so I can just survey the side of the building to see what kind of compositions that I can create. I like the fact that I can play off the shapes of the architecture itself as well as the shapes that are painted on the walls. So here I wanted to really try to keep the roof line parallel to the top edge of the frame, and then we just have all the different shapes kind of coming off of it. But I think the negative space at the bottom is a little bit too much. So I try to do something a little bit different and include a little bit of the puddle at the bottom, but I'm still not really happy with this photo. This particular photo is my favorite one of this building. I was trying to create different layers with the building, again going from the sky to the roof to the wall to the other roof to the wall to the railing to the kind of like platform to the asphalt. And I think because it plays into with the actual painted black and white of the abstract shapes, it just looks all types of confusing and chaotic and also orderly at the same time, because you have the horizontal lines and then you have all these diagonal lines kind of interrupting everything. And as I continue to walk down, I really wanted to hone in on specifically these two diagonal lines and kind of crop in a little bit closer and include some of the other elements like the piping and the little sign at the top. Now I start heading back to the other side, kind of finishing up the photo walk, checking the time to see how much I got left. I still don't feel like I have a photo that I'm like entirely proud of. So before I cross the street, I noticed that this building is over here and I just wanted to photograph it at the corner. The lighting isn't perfectly what I want it to be. I wish there was more dynamic lighting, but you know, I just wanted to get the corner of the building as well as capturing some of the street. And as I cross the street, I see this window and I want to do a little bit of a selfie through the window. But unfortunately, the window is like really distorted, so I couldn't even capture that. So at this point, I'm feeling like I'm not really getting any photo the way that I absolutely wanted, but you know, that's kind of sometimes what happens on these photo walks. And then here is where I hit the gold mine, this specific alley. The first thing I see is at the bottom, there's this puddle with this perfectly lit rooftop at the bottom of the puddle. So this is one of my favorite compositions within the photo walk, and I like the fact that there is the upside down building, a really nice blue color coming into the puddle where the sky is, and we have the yellow of the building and then the orange roof line, and then we have like a frame within a frame of the puddle. But I do wish that there's not as much negative space within the puddle between the roofline and the puddle edges, so I reframe it slightly to get a little bit more of the roof and stuff inside of it. And this, I would say, is one of my absolute favorite photos from this particular photo walk. Coming off this high, I just keep looking around and I just decide to see if I can find a reflection from one of these windows. And if you can see that the windows are really frosted and not clear, and this creates this absolutely gorgeous glow, almost like a ghost-like eerie vibe inside this scene. So this first one is in color, and you can see that there's just this crazy almost like cloud or aura that comes from each of the windows, and then they're casting this diagonal kind of light pattern on the ground with the pillars kind of interrupting it in between. And what I do from here is I switch up my film simulation recipe to my black and white one, and this is probably also one of my favorite photos, just tied with the puddle photo. So we have the rules of 3 playing out here, because we have the windows 1, 2, 3 at the top, and then there's the diagonal light coming from the windows, and I think just with the black and white it adds more mystery. From here I see another window that has a crack in it, and I want to just capture the texture of this window, and I frame it in a way where it has the light reflecting off the building on the other side. And because there is a wooden plank behind the window, it allows like the complete reflection of the other side to go through. This is more of an abstract type of photo, just really lighting and texture and little jagged shapes here and there. Something that I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with these types of photos, but I definitely like how it looks like. And then whenever I'm taking these types of photos, I'm always switching back between my color film simulation recipe, Reggie's Portrait, and my black and white film simulation recipe, which is based on Ilford HP5. And I look back inside the windows again, and I try to capture part of the window pane on the right hand side as kind of like a framing element. I'm not sure if it's really working here. I definitely like my previous composition of inside this building better, but I'm just trying to experiment with different things that I can get. And shooting through this window, I can see partly through the window and also a reflection. So I kind of do an almost in-camera double exposure by having the reflection on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side is shooting through the window. And then walking down, I turn around real quick just to capture the highlight of the top of the buildings that we were looking through in the puddle earlier. So it's just the sky, the rooftop, and then cutting another line with the shadow that's cutting across. And the black and white, I'm not as much of a fan of as the actual color version. Here, the sky really comes out super blue and punchy and a little bit dark. And then we have the highlight of the sunlight hitting the building, which brings out the red texture in the roof line, as well as those those like boarded windows at the top. And then we have the line, the hard shadow line that cuts across, and you can still see some detail down below. And as I make my way down the street, I look back at this building, the one that I was just photographing, and I just photographed the front side of it just because I wanted to document like what type of light was going through for context of those black and white photos that I did of inside the building through the window. And this building on the left here with the orange door looks really cool when the lighting is on the other side, but for this particular situation, it wasn't as interesting as I had remembered. I ended up just taking a photo of just the corner of the building with, again, the shadow on the left side, and on the right side we have just the highlight with the orange kind of roof line, which is you've seen a theme of this across all these different buildings with a nice dark blue. And as I round the corner of this building, I photographed this mural. It's a really beautiful mural with a lot of colors, greens, blues, pinks, oranges. And I frame it in a way where there's going to be a little bit of negative space to the left, where I use this like light post or electric post to cut it like right down in the middle. So you have like the leading line of the roof line going down, and it goes to the light post to kind of give a kind of balance to the photo. And then I scoop back around and I try to photograph just like the wall itself, just a portion of the wall. And here I photographed just like this almost like flower that looks like it's paint drops or whatever, and just shooting it straight on just to document the colors and get the contrast. And walking across this lot that we started at, I take a photo of this building again, and using this puddle to kind of mirror it a little bit at the bottom. And as I cross this lot, off to the left side, I like the look of this particular building. I'm just trying to find a orderly arrangement of all these windows with some other framing elements. So I kind of settle on this particular photo where I frame it so that there's kind of like equal space on the left and the right hand side, split by these two like orange lines. And then we have kind of an asymmetrical thing going on because the door is only on the right hand side. And I wanted to include this little like yellow chain at the bottom. Reminded me kind of like a happy face, kind of like making a happy face with this building. Thanks everyone for tagging along with me. If you have any questions about the compositions, please ask them in the comments down below. And if you want to check out the film simulation recipes for the photos that I was showing in this video, watch these two videos here.